water is calm. The night is too. Tomorrow we land with a job to do, a job that's hard to face, but it has happened to the best of race. With God's help, we'll pull through this awful job we have to do, a job we know not much about. 'Tis soon we'll find out, that's no doubt. I'm going now to do my part. With God I pray with all my heart that he may give and I'll abide, for him to take me home alive, to take me back to the far off shores, to the ones I love and adore. And I had a write-up where my grandson had found a poem in my scrapbook, and I had given it to a Marine in a Sunday school class in 1950, and it says, from a lonesome GI in Incheon Harbor, Korea, that made a beachside landing, June. This was written and put into my helmet the night before we landed on the beachhead. This poem was saved for 65 years. My full name is William J. Murray. I was named Buddy, and on my birth certificate was put Baby Buddy, because I am the baby of 12 and the only one living at this particular time. Born in Somerville, South Carolina, and that's where I went to school. I did not finish college, and I was engaged to be married while I was in Korea, but that didn't work out during Christmas of the year before I came home. And the lovely wife I have now, I only knew her 3 months, and my family said it wouldn't work. We've made 65 years now, and we still talk to each other every now and then. I grew up in Somerville, South Carolina, and finished high school there. And after I finished high school, I worked at the post office. My father was a fruit mail carrier for 32 years out of Somerville, and I was his sub-carrier on the rural route. In fact, I even got an excuse from school when he was sick or something to carry the mail. So my hobby was to get in the post office. So I was lined up for his rural route when he retired. And Uncle Sam called me instead. And they were laughing at me. I was saying I had flat feet. They can't take me in the Army. I got everything in the world wrong with me. They won't take me. And I come back in one day off the route into the office, and there's my question there, you are now in the Army. So
that was your draft notice?
No, that was before I went to Korea. And
what year was this?
1950, probably 65 years ago. Well, they can't take me. I've got flat feet, for an example, you know. But they took me. And the way the world goes around, we were waiting on the exam to come open for the rural route. And my daddy said, let's play a little politics. And I can get you the rural route, and then when you get out the service, you'll have it. And I said, no, I don't want it unless it's meant to be. And sure enough, while I was before I went into the service, somebody transferred from the Navy Yard, which is a government operation on ships and stuff, and transferred to the post office department, which can't be done, but it was done, you know, how those systems work. So when I got out of the service, I went back to the post office as assistant on that one rural route and another rural route, and assistant for 2 clerks in the office. So I stayed pretty busy. And the good thing about it, when I filled in for them, if they had been there 1 year, 10 years or what, I received their salary. So that helped out. And then when I was probably 13 years old, my father and mother liked to go to the movie every Wednesday because it had a jackpot. And they won the jackpot one time, and they thought that was the best thing in the world, so they had to go to the movie every Wednesday. But a lot of times we didn't have money for the whole family. So I sneaked in behind them and got caught. And the manager said, "Do you want to go to work?" And my daddy said, "Yes, naturally." So he gave me a flashlight and said, "Now you're an usher." While working at the post office, I worked myself up to assistant manager at the theater as well. So I had 2 jobs, and that's about where it went.
So at what point the war was going on and they started the draft, and you heard about the draft?
Yeah.
You got your draft notice. What happens after you get your draft notice?
They give you so much time to get prepared, and then they give you a 30-day leave of a 30-day notice before you enter. And we all got on the bus and went to Fort Jackson, which is in Columbia, South Carolina, and that's where we took basic training, which is, 8 weeks, 14 weeks or something. And this was the year that Truman started irrigating, such where we were mixing whites with black. And while overseas in Korea, we had the 24th Division was not too successful because they had a habit of running the wrong way. Instead of advancing, they were retreating. So they broke up that division, put us in the other divisions, and we had 4, which was wonderful guys in our section. So everything turned out right good on that.
So basic was what, 6-8 weeks?
I think so.
Yeah.
And we had that on what they call Tank Hill, which is famous for Fort Jackson. Kind of rough, up and down hills and what have you, but we made it.
Were you in the cavalry or?
No, Army, foot soldier. I was taking basics to become a rifleman. Your rifleman is right on the front line. Your mortarman is, you got your 60 mortar along with your rifleman. You got your 81 mortar behind that, and they shoot overhead to tanks and what have you. And if you did good on the gun as getting in on your target and doing good, they promoted you to gunner. And then when you went from gunner to forward observer, that's ahead of the line, and you call back saying, "Fire on target so-and-so." And Haggard, another buddy of mine, decided we were going to be dumb. We didn't know nothing about that gun, that mortar. We had to know how to fire it and operate to become a gunner. But you were put on the front line becoming a gunner. So we acted like we didn't know anything about the gun and couldn't operate it. So when we got ready to deploy from there and come home a year later, come to find out we were the 2 best gunners in the outfit. But we stayed alive. So that was part of it. And I think about it, I had happened to leave home on Mother's Day, going in the service. And they hurried us up in Korea to get us back home on Mother's Day 1 year later. And my mother always said that was the worst and the best Mother's Day present she ever had, and we never could find out which one was. I would imagine coming home was the best. I know it was for me.
What did your parents think about you going off to Korea?
They had a lot of prayers. I'd have to say that was the help. But being the baby of the family, it didn't set in too good, you know.
Yeah. Was there a military history in your family?
No military. No, I had a brother, Jay, who was, this is way back now. See, I'm from an old family. And Jay was in the Navy in California, and the earthquake came, and he was in a building. As he was coming out of a building, a brick caught him in the head and killed him. And that was when I was 4 years old. And believe it or not, I still remember it. And from the time it took that body to come from California, which the Navy was sending, to home, my father was black-headed and turned completely white-headed. And I was only 4 years old, and I remember it just like it was yesterday. But that was one that was lost in the family.
Wow. So after basic, where do you go?
After basic, you go to you get ready for going overseas, and they take you to camp in Chicago, and we boarded a troop train, and that troop train went to Seattle, Washington, I think it was. And we left from Seattle, Washington by boat, which was 3,199 GIs on it. The Marine Phoenix was the name of the ship. And we got on that, and then we landed on the barges that, when we got to Incheon, and that's where we landed we got off the barges in the water into make a seaside landing.
So you went from Seattle to a troop vessel, and they took you right to Incheon.
Right.
Really? Wow. So tell me about Incheon, what that experience was like. So what did you do when you first got there? You got on a barge.
Well, when we first got on land, like I said, that night when I wrote the poem, you could hear rounds going off the thing, but we wasn't set up as a battalion anywhere yet. But once we got set up, they'd call back concentrations, like a set of tanks, 4 or 5 tanks. We'd have to, being we were in large artillery, we'd have to have a large subject to shoot at, like tanks, what have you. And they'd call back and we'd shoot on those particular items. And sometimes we'd move missiles also. But it was better than being right straight on the line like a rifleman, being drafted as a rifleman and a gunner. That was quite a treat for me, by me running off a big mouth. The captain wanted to know if anybody knew anything about typing. And I said, oh yeah, I know all about typing, which I did not. And he said, well, we're going to put you in mortars, which kept me from being right on the front line. But we stayed there a year and had a few close calls. And
such as what?
Hill 717 and 682, the Marines lost half of their division. And we took over the 2 hills after they left. 717, 682, just had numbers then. And they called back the battalion to have them, for Air Force to stress them with napalm. The Chinese got hold to it and called back and had them stress the Americans. We were stressing ourselves. And I remember Cundy and I calling back at a stalactite mine thing. We crawled back in that maybe 200 yards, and it was hot in there. We could feel the heat from the napalm going off, and we stayed in there about a day standing straight up, and we made it. And then the next 4 days, we had 4 days of taking the wounded and the dead off the hills. And that was part of one time we were scared. And people like to hear combat stories, and veterans, we don't really brag on them, but I'm in the position to brag now, I'll brag a little bit. We were going up the hill, and being short of me, and I had to tote the mortar, which is 80 pounds. And 2 people usually handle that, but the base plate and the mortar, but short of me, and I was taking it uphill. And I was sitting kind of still, and the commander said, buddy, Murray, get down, they're shooting at you. And I knew when he said that, you get down and you be still and you don't even move your eyeballs, because we were trained to be that way. Well, the first round came by my left ear, and it was so close to my ear I could feel the heat burning my ear, but it didn't touch my ear, it didn't touch me. And as I was being there still, of course I was saying some prayers, the next round hit a leaf above my helmet and clipped a little leaf off the limb. And that leaf got in the wind and blew up and down and hit me on the nose. And that scared me half to death. And that was about as scary as it was on that one particular time we had a combat story. I had several others, but not too exciting.
What was the objective of Incheon? Why were we there?
They were trying to go into North Korea from South Korea. And MacArthur, in the history books, it's where Truman fired MacArthur, this is, like I say, 65 years ago. MacArthur was we were up on the mountain next to the Yellow River. And that night we were supposed to go across the river and go into China. Of course, that would have been a world war probably. So Truman fired MacArthur on that, and we stayed in Korea. And our objective was to stay behind the 38th parallel. That was dividing North and South Korea. And they had what was known as the Iron Triangle from different towns like Seoul on around. We fought the whole way around, back around the Seoul the year that I was there. And it was, you never was bored for not doing this because you're always doing something. And I had a fit for clean peaches to eat, because as you can look at me, I love to eat. And my daddy said, son, it costs too much money to send them. I said, well, sell my car I had left. I had a brand new Pontiac I had left home. I said, sell my car. And I thought he wouldn't do it though. But he sent me a case of clean peaches. And I was so happy. And the purchase, I think it was $134 on it. But anyhow, as I opened one can, they hollered, move out. That means pack up, move out, we leave. I got one can of peaches out there, 24 cans of peaches. But I never did beg for no more peaches, so nothing else sent from home.
You're in Incheon. How long were you there?
In the whole perimeter a year.
So you were actually in Incheon for a year?
Yeah, in Korea. We moved around from position to position. All around, as the Chinese would move, we would move to fight back. Oh, right. You know.
And this fighting all along the 38th parallel?
Yes, it's surrounded by the 30th parallel from Seoul, Korea, on around to Pujan, back around. Of course, we didn't know where we were. We were just in one position, firing, and they said, we got a tank fired on his such a position. We set up the guns and fired on it, such as that. And then in turn, they would fire back at us, most all the time missing us. But we had one close call in the gun pit one time. You dropped the mortar in the round. It's got detonating points on the bottom of it to tell how far it goes. The only way the round can go off, it's got a detonating point on the end of the round, and it's got to hit something. I dropped the round in on top of a round coming out the tube. All four of us in the pit laid down because we knew we were dead and gone. That round hit the round coming out hit the round I had in my hand. We were trying not to hold it too tight. It hit it and knocked it out of my hand and laid it flat on the ground, and it didn't go off. But we all four of us laid on the pit, thought we was going, but it never did go off. So somebody was working with us, wasn't it? They said, oh, you were in the service. Hey, bye. That's about it. It wasn't no big deal. But I would like to congratulate Findlay, Ohio. They have really, really gone out for veterans, which even 65 years later, it means a lot to me and means a lot to the others, for the simple reason other people didn't recognize us. And it was really nice, and it makes me like Findlay that much more.
Tell me about the honor flight.
The honor flight was wonderful. Jerry had it, my son had it all set up when I got here. And that's how I met Larry on the honor flight. And anybody that's ever been in the service or anything ought to take that opportunity if they can. It was one of the best trips or anything I'd ever had. We left there at 2:30 in the morning, got back about 8:30 the next night, wasn't sleepy or tired a bit. We seen parts of the Korean conflict. In fact, my scrapbook, there's a picture of all the monuments of the Korean heritage and where all the Korean soldiers were buried at the memorial at Washington. And we had to spend a whole day going around to different things and seeing different things. And it was the most wonderful trip I have ever spent in my life. And it's well worth it. Whoever has an opportunity to go, the garden can take them, please take them.
Tell me more about the 25th Infantry.
The 25th Infantry, I think its headquarters, I'm pretty sure, was in Hawaii. And it was called the Lightning Outfit. It had a streak of lightning coming down on in an emblem. And they were a well-known outfit at the particular time. And like the 2 hills I was talking about earlier, they didn't hold those hills, but we did. Not, of course, I'm bragging on the Army over the Marines, but you got to brag sometime. But we were proud of that we could do something that they couldn't do, like hold those 2 hills. But then again, it was 4 or 5 days of kind of scary stuff. But anyhow.
You're in Korea for a year. Anything else remarkable about Korea? Did you go on, leave? Did you go to Seoul? What did you guys do for leave?
We got to go to 1 week in Japan. I got to go. I got paid. I sent my money home naturally, which is a little small check as a private, you can imagine. But nowhere to keep it to send it home. The time I sent it home, they said you're going on the R&R. So we got money enough for me to go. And it was a week I spent a week in Osaka, and it was a week of really enjoying life. And it brought back home week to you, maybe, And
what do you remember about Osaka? What'd you guys do for a week?
Can I say that on the air?
Okay, never mind.
Okay. But anyhow, it was an exciting week, and we went out different places. We went to shows and different things of Japanese culture that we hadn't seen. And it was a fun week, but it was a fast week.
So where did you meet the lovely young woman who wrote you a love letter? Can you tell me about her?
Call it rest and recuperation, but that's not what I call it. I can't say it on the air. Excuse me. But anyhow, I don't know. A lot of them would go to Japan and stay at home with the women, the young girls. Well, Linda wasn't but 13 to start with. It was an exciting week. Like Curtis was with me, and he was in another room. He said, "Buddy," he says, "come on, let's go see a movie." I said, "I've lived all my life for this, and you want to get out of this bed and go see a movie?" So you can imagine what the week was like. But anyhow, it was an idea in life. If I don't know this, I'm going back to Korea, and where will I go from there? So if you want to do anything, do it now, because you don't know whether you do it again or not, you know what I mean? So that was a fun week.
I love you, darling. 朝鮮は今と
It's
ても
very
寒い
cold
と
here
の
in
こと。
Osaka.
今日は大阪にも雪がちら
It
つ
is
き、
snowing
リ
heavily.
ンダは今机に向かってあなたにペンを
I'm
走らせ
walking
てい
to
る
my
のです。
desk,
リンダ
writing
も
a
この冬
letter.
には一月も床につきました。あなたもどうかお体を気をつけ
I've
て。
been sick for almost a
では
month now.
今日はこの辺でペンを置きます。またこの次にお手紙いたします。お体を大切に。
Please do take care of
さようなら。
yourself.
愛する。
Did you see any entertainers and celebrities come over and play for you guys while you were there?
Well, yes, we've seen
Bob Hope.
entertainers. I didn't get Bob Hope.
No.
Danny Kaye.
Oh, yeah.
I got Danny Kaye, and it was another one, and I was about 4 people from the stage at one of them. And we had a lot of entertainment, like troops, Danny Kaye and, I don't know who else we had, but that was nice. You get to pull off a line. And we'd pull off a line in the wintertime, 32 below zero, and we'd have to have a bath once a month. If we could get it, if it wasn't too cold, 32 below zero. And we're down in a foxhole, more or less. And every time I'd come back off a line to get a bath, I'd catch the flu. So I said to myself, I'm not going anymore. So I did not go for a bath anymore. So That's why that's why everybody left Japan though. My shirt was so dirty, when I took it off, you couldn't even bend the collar, but I didn't have the flu anymore. But you do things up to what the condition is at the particular time you're in. You know what I mean? If you're doing a lot of fighting, you're doing a lot of fighting. If you're not, you're not. You know what I mean? But it was an exciting experience. In fact, I have 2 sons and a daughter, and it would not have made me mad to have either one of my sons be drafted in the Army for a year, because it teaches them discipline, if nothing else. And if you or anybody else would have a son, I would recommend the service for at least a year, because it taught me a lot about life and what it prevails. So that's about the way it went.
When you're in Korea and you're on the 38th parallel, are the soldiers, are they grumbling about why they're there in the first place? What is this war all about? Are they upset? What was the talk on the front lines? What were they discussing?
There were the ones that were really discussing and didn't see no reason to be there. They had a strict way of getting back home. They'd stick their hand in a bucket of kerosene and freeze their hands or something like that, or freeze their feet in order to get back to the hospital. And from the hospital, they sent them back to the States. And would you believe people did that to keep from staying over there? Which maybe a couple of times I thought of it, but no. I like my feet and hands too well. But that's horrible. I mean, that's pretty bad when, you just can't stand it anymore. You've got somebody shooting at you, and you've got to shoot back, and that's about all the life you got. But anyhow, we made it. The ones that made it, I think, done a good job.
The Battle of Incheon is very famous. Were there a lot of casualties?
We lost half of our division on those 2 hills, as well as the Marines.
Over a course of what time? How much time? Not the entire time you were there.
On those 2 hills, I guess we were there 2 weeks probably. That said, it's taking off the casualties and holding the hill. And I never did see an enemy. The guy was shooting at me, I never seen him. If I had, I'd have shot him. But I had 14 rounds of carbine ammunition and 4 hand grenades. And I wasn't about to use one until I really had to, because I was saving them to the last in case I had to have it. So I never needed them, so that worked out good.
What happens with the end of that battle? It's just a stalemate, or are you just holding the line?
Stalemate. They call back to you and say, well, you all knocked out 2 tanks on that particular fire mission, or you knocked out so-and-so, or you knocked out a battalion, or what have you. And that's what that forward observer did, telling back to us what we had shot at, and whether we hit it or whether we didn't. And, a lot of times we didn't, but we in the mortars couldn't see what was going on, because we were 1,000 foot behind the lines. And then they had the 75 mortars, 75 heavy guns shooting over us too. So we were in if it had to be on the line, I think I was in the best position by being in the mortars. Very few times I probably didn't have sense enough to be scared, but probably a lot of times I wasn't scared. But then, like the night before we landed and things like that, it was a scary situation, because you didn't know what to expect tomorrow. You'd be laying there sleeping, and they'd tell you to move out. A lot of times we slept in snow, maybe like we got here now, and in a sleeping bag, and that air hole coming out where your mouth is, you stay just as warm, just like you had a fire under there. But many a night I slept on the snow like that. And the little hut I built, the picture I had in my scrapbook there, we called it a bunker. We took old ammo boxes and what have you, and tried to make us a place to sleep. And that that little room was probably 4 foot by 4 foot, maybe 6 foot high, and I had made me a stove. I took an ammunition can and put up on the bank, put sand in it, and put a gasoline can above that with a little tube running into that sand, and it would drip in that sand and catch that sand on fire and run down that pipe to the sand. I had it in another can in the bunker, and it would hit that sand and light, and it kept us warm, freezing to death. That was one of my inventions.
That's what they say about the Army. It's a lot of time between skirmishes and battles.
Yeah. Sometimes we'd go a week or so, what we can do. And then we'd have a concentration. We'd move into our area or our perimeter, and that would give us opportunity to fire on it. And a lot of times, the ammunition was rationed. We would have to call back the battalion and see, and this is awful, but it was hard times on ammunition. And the Ethiopians moved out of position one time and left 500 rounds there. And you talking about having a ball, but we had us a good time. We just fired like mad. Don't know what was firing at or why. But we got to use up their ammunition. And things like that, you have to realize how important a little thing is, a mortar round, that you have to go through rations to get one to shoot at your enemy. But that was part of it, I imagine.
So you're in Korea for a year.
1 year.
Take me to the point where you're getting ready to leave. Is the war coming to a truce, or you just bugged out because you had spent your time?
Well, we had replacements come in and replace us. And they rushed us up on the counter. If I said it, I left home on Mother's Day to go to Korea at 10:30. 1 year later, on Mother's Day at 11:30, I was home. And they rushed the shipment up to get us home for Mother's Day. And my mother said that was, if I will repeat myself, don't hold it against me, but Mama always said that was the best present she ever had and the worst, but she never told me which one was which. That's where we went. Coming back, though, that they flew most of us coming back so we could get home for Mother's Day. Yeah, but they flew us because I remember landing at the airport, and I was supposed to have been engaged for 2.5 years, but that last Christmas Day I got a Dear John letter, so she wasn't there, so that was good. So, and the funny thing, my daddy thought, I guess because I was the baby of the family, he could just do anything he wanted to do, I reckon. Here I see him coming in that old Pontiac car of his, driving up in the airport where I was in the airplane. And he tells the sergeant, "Get my son off there, I want to see him." But it didn't work that way. I had to go ahead and be mustered out like everybody else, give us clothes or what have you. But that was it. And then I had 3 more months to go into service. And they put us back at Fort Jackson, guarding prisoners. Those prisoners were people that Americans that went AWOL and different things like that. And if you let them go, you had to serve their time. And I had one of them try me. And I said, "You see this rifle, don't you?" I said, "I really didn't know how to use it." And I said, "You act one little tinsy move, you're not going to be able to go back to the barracks." And he must have sunk in because he didn't try anything. But they would try you. It's cut up with you and things like that, see if they could get your attention off of them. They'd probably give you 2 to 4 prisoners to guard, make you go out and pick vegetables or something, just to keep them busy. And that was harder actually than being in Korea, for the simple reason you knew that if you messed up, you had to pay for it. So then I got out and I had to stay in the reserve 2 years. And then the best thing out of all this story is that thing says, "You're discharged," honorable discharge. So I guess that made it all worthwhile.
Tell me about the night before the landings in Incheon, and you're sitting where, in your barracks or on a boat?
We're sitting in the what's called conveyor belt, they transfer us from the ship on a ramp down to them. Each so many GIs and down a ramp on the side of the big ship, and then that pontoon pull up to where we'd all be, where we could land at one time. Pull up on the
So
bank.
the night before, you're sitting thinking about the landing, and you write a poem.
Yes, the night I wrote the poem because, I mean, you're standing there by a rail knowing you're going to land in the morning before, it was actually before daylight, so they couldn't see us coming in as much, you know. And like I said before, I couldn't swim, so I was kind of scared, and that poem just came a part of being there that night. And if it hadn't been for my grandson, nobody had ever known about that poem or any poem I had written for that matter. But he was up in the attic straightening up stuff after we moved to Findlay here. We sold the home.
And you put that poem in your helmet.
I put that poem in my helmet in case anything happened to me. I might become famous, I don't know. But I would have to say I'm very famous for the simple reason that was 65 years ago, remember? And we're still remembering it. And in the back of my mind, you watch me, if you live to be old enough, we're going to be back in Korea fighting before it's over. I was married to an American girl in the States before I went overseas. And I got a dead John letter at Christmas. She said she worked in a jewelry store in Columbia. And she said during the Christmas she just didn't have time. She wrote me every day. And I wrote back something I'm fine by, if there's nothing else. And she wrote me at Christmas when I was in that bunker freezing half to death. And I told her she didn't have time to write me fluid to it. I didn't care whether she ever wrote me again or not. And that's probably where it started. And then I wrote for a pinup picture to put in my bunker of other girls. And one of them was her cousin. And she found out about it. And she was over to my sister's, and my letter was up on the refrigerator. And Maxine said, something's happened to Buddy, because Mina didn't let me read that letter. And when Mina left the room, she read the letter, and the letter said, send me some pictures of Juanita Rust in bathing suits and all that stuff, and that's what blew her mind. Why, I don't know. But then that didn't work out when I got home. We had one date after all that year, writing every day, and that was it. And so I was working at the theater, and Harriet, my wife now, she was working at the dime store across the street. And we rented apartments. We had 5 houses we rented in my family. And one of the girls knew this Harriet that lived 7 miles out of town to a small town. And I said I wanted to meet her, so it didn't take long, because that night she was at the theater. And we talked, and 3 months' time we were married. Of course, my family said it wouldn't work because we didn't know each other that much, you know. And we've had a pretty good life. She was, I guess you'd have to say she was the smartest woman I ever married.
After you got out of the Army, what did you do?
Well, I worked at the post office some and the theater. Now, this is the big part. I became manager of a milk company, branch manager for a milk company. That's why we moved Somerville to Aiken, South Carolina. And everybody said, good night. I knew Gibson, I knew him before I went into service. And he wanted me to become a milkman. I said, man, nothing would be worse than that than being a garbage man. I said, there's no way you're going to get me. And that was a Saturday. I had come off the rural route, which I'd stop by the house and have lunch. And Harriet said Gibson had called, wanted me to come to work for him. I said, I'll never go to work for him. I stayed there 20 years. And made branch manager the first year and built that to 12 paying routes less than 2 years. I guess because I like to talk. Yeah.
Do you have any famous quotes or mantras that you live by that you like to tell yourself or tell your family for inspiration? I know that you've written poems, you've written prayers. How do these inspire you, and how do they inspire your family and your friends?
It inspired my family and friends a lot. And one poem in there, Japanese, he was helping out in the platoon, like bring up meals, sea ration stuff online, and he helped me write one poem. And
Do you want to read it?
have to find it, but this was something that kept me busy, if you call it that. But this is not the one I'm thinking about, but this is a prayer that I thought a lot of. So may I read it?
Yes, please.
A prayer in my heart. I am hurried this morning because I got a late start. But there's a prayer in my pocket and it's close to my heart. I will keep it right with me as I go through the day. I can talk to and master and hear me this way. I feel safe where I'm going, for the master goes too. With a prayer in my pocket, I will know what to do. I can keep him there with me all as I go through the day and have blessed assurance that he hears what I say. That was one of them. Probably done lost it there. What was I'm looking for? A prayer for my girl. Huh?
Yeah, let's do that.
I haven't read that one yet. A prayer for my girl. O Lord, be kind and send me back to one who waits and knows the lack. Her absence brings who awaits the day when love will bring me home to stay. Oh, let her smile encircle me. Oh, let her smile be clear and strong, as when she went and led a song. Well, from her lips the song we knew and shared to make our dreams come true. Oh, let her arms encircle me again until the shadows flee, that I may learn from her caress the ultimate intendedness. My prayer is one of many true, but life is sweet and love is new. Oh, let me find when strife is past, the road that leads me home at last.
Very nice.
Thank you.